It's 1 o'clock, so we're going to start our webinar. My name is Larry Stevenson, and we're here to discuss the 5 keys to getting a great job quickly. Find your dream job within 2 months. As people join, I want to remind them that feel free to ask questions. This is all about how can I help you, and so we want to make sure that we're covering what you're interested in. You can do that by clicking on the phone icon so that you're getting the audio portion. You can raise your hand using the free conference call, or just speak out because I'm leaving everyone unmuted at this point. So look forward to hearing from people. Let's start with the overview of the 5 keys. First key to finding a job, and before I begin that, let me start with a story. I'm going to tell you the story of Brady. Brady was a mechanical engineer. He had a degree and master's in mechanical engineering. He was working on a job, not really happy with what he was doing, wanted something more challenging, and didn't feel that anyone took him seriously. He'd been looking for a job for a little over a year and a half while working and hadn't found anything, was very frustrated. We started working with him. It took a month for him to really understand these keys, but at the end of the month, he got it. And in 2 months, he had not 1, but 3 fantastic offers for a mechanical engineering job. And that's just one story. Another story that you'll hear me talk about is Sunday's a recent one that we worked with, and she had lost her job. She'd been looking for a while, got in touch with us, and started implementing these keys. Within 6 weeks, she had a job. I was just talking to her about it last week, and she said it was one of the best jobs that she has ever had, and she is loving what she is doing and the group that she is with because of these 5 keys. We'll share other stories as we go through, both good examples and bad examples. But with this, let's start with the overview of the 5 keys. The first key is to identify your purpose and passion, then write an employer description. The second key is to adopt the "how can I help" attitude. Third, ask questions to discover wants and needs. Fourth, prove you are the solution they need. And then 5th, hit your 10s each week. We're going to go over each one of these. Today's webinar is going to be more sharing this, giving the overview, laying the foundation, and in the next 5 webinars, we're going to go into each key in depth and actually become very interactive with those of you who are participating in the webinar, sharing your parts, and we work together. So let's start with the first key to finding a great job in less than 2 months. And that is your dream job versus how can I help, asking the questions that will help you discover the wants and needs, then proving you are the solution they are looking for, and hitting your 10s each week. Those are the 5 keys. So first, write your own employer description. Companies write job descriptions so that they have a template that they can compare potential candidates to look at. Does this person or which of these people match their qualifications and what they're looking for the most? What we're advocating is, just as companies have drafted what the ideal person for that job is, that we should then identify and draft an employer description describing what your dream job would be. And to do that, you then compare each option that comes to you with your dream job to see how well it matches what you're looking for. Now, to identify that, you have to identify your passion and purpose, and we suggest using these 6 essential elements of a job. The first element is, what are the skills and responsibilities you love to do? So the first section of your employer description describes those skills, those responsibilities you love to do, and what percentage of the job you want that to be. Second, now you put the industries that interest you. And I want to point out that each industry has a significant change on the job title. Let me share an example. Picture a manager. We know what managers do. Their basic skills and responsibilities stay the same. But now, picture a manager in a bank. Now picture a manager in a manufacturing situation. And now picture a manager in a food service. Do you see how the job has changed? Even though the nature is the same, the feel of the job is significantly different depending on the industry that job is working in. So, second, identify the industries that interest you. Third, we're going to look at the size of the organization you want to work for. Do you want to work for a startup, a small company, a medium company, a large company, or a global company? Size has a big impact. So, for example, let's go back to our manager, and let's say that we did a manager in a manufacturing environment. How is that job going to change with a small startup where there may be 3 people working in the company versus a medium-sized company where they've got maybe 100 people, to a global company where they've got hundreds of offices around the world? And so as you look at the size, what size of organization is going to bring your passion, your purpose, and allow you to do? Recognizing the smaller the company, the broader the scope that you will have to do. The bigger the company, the more narrow the box they put you into. So, fourth, we look at ownership. Ownership of the organization that you want to work for. For example, do you want to work for a stockholder-owned company? These are usually the large corporations. Or do you want to work for a private company? Or is the ownership self, where you own it? Or we the people, which is government? Or no ownership, which is a nonprofit? When you look at the options, once again, how the ownership exists modifies significantly the skills you're doing, the industry, the size, the growth. For example, if you're working for a good medium to large privately held company, how many of the upper level positions are held by family members versus if you are working the business and you own it yourself? Now, some people will get confused with size of the organization and the ownership, but there are several privately held, huge companies that they're privately held, but they are very large, even global. So when you look at your ideal job, write down what kind of ownership do you want to see owning that company. Now that you looked at the skills, you've looked at the industry, you've looked at the size and the ownership, now we go to the location. And location is both geographic and locale. Geographic means the state, the country, the state, the city, etc. The locale means, do you want a metro feeling, working urban, working suburban, working rural, or working virtual? And as you look at that locale, that begins to help you modify and see the difference. Now, the last thing you want to identify in your passion and purpose is going to be the environment of the position. And that means environment can mean the physical layout. Some companies, you still walk in and you will see a bunch of desks, and the desks are all in a nice row. They look like a spreadsheet, rows and columns. You saw a lot of this in movies in the 1950s. There are still companies who do that. Some physical layouts, you'll go in and they're all individual offices, and there's an assembly line, and you have management in offices, and everyone else is working in a plant environment. In some, they want more of a collaborative feeling, and so they're building bullpens and work team stations. I walked into a manufacturing company, it's a textile company, and they had these pods of 6 people working in a pod, and they would all work together, but the machines were all in a circle so that people were working and interacting. That's the physical environment. The cultural environment includes the written, the unwritten rules. I had one person I was working with, for example, who had a hard time understanding this, and he was showing up for work at 15 minutes to 8 every day, and he was leaving at 15 minutes after 5, which in most companies would have been really good. This, however, was a small college environment that was working on a grant, and all the other people came in at 11 o'clock and worked till 7. He just didn't fit into that culture. And when those other employees spun off and formed and commercialized the project they were working on, guess who the only person on the team that wasn't included? So you want to make sure you've got a cultural fit that you're going to feel comfortable with. And the last one is the leadership style. And leadership styles can be autocratic, they can be laissez-faire, they can be collaborative, they can be participative. You want to get the leadership style that is right for you. And you draft this into a document sharing what it is that you want, and you compare opportunities to that. Now, let me share some tools to help you identify the skills you love to use. One of my favorites is Richard Nodell's Motivated Skills Card Sort. Dick Nodell has put together a simple one. Most schools will have them. There are online portions. You can search for Dick Nodell. Nodell is spelled Knowdell, and you can take it online. There are online versions. Another way to help identify the skills you love is find job descriptions of job titles that interest you, and then go through the skills and responsibilities sections and choose about 5 to 6 of these and go through and start looking at what the skills and the responsibilities are and writing down those that seem to be in common that really resonate with you. So they're suggesting, by showing what they want, different skills and opportunities. Another one is called ONET Online, and you can find that at ONET Online without the asterisks. We're going to go into each of these in more detail in our next webinar, and we'll show you how to use these. But for right now, you can get started by using those to identify the skills you love to use. Okay, second step. Now the key is to adopt the how can I help attitude. And for this, I'm going to describe a couple of things. The first thing on adopting the how can I help attitude is you have to stop saying stupid stuff. And that sounds harsh, but I'm saying that to get your attention. And I want to share some stories that illustrate examples of stupid stuff. One, I was working with a gentleman. He had called. He was coming down to our area. This was a gentleman who had been an expert in cheese quality on 5 continents. He had worked with cheese, dairy products in Africa, Europe, South America, North America, and Asia. He had been working for a company, one of the leading cheese manufacturers in the country. They had done some downsizing. He'd lost his job. He'd been out of work for 8 weeks. He was coming into my geographic area, and he asked, "Can I come talk to you?" I said, "Sure, what brings you down here?" He says, "I'm meeting with Nestle's and Meadow Gold and some other big companies." And when he came in, I said, "So how did it go?" He said, "To tell you the truth, it was very frustrating." He said, "Everywhere I went, I wanted to talk to the CEO, and everyone kept referring me to human resource. I felt like I was hitting my head against a wall all day." So I asked him, "Treat me the way you treated that receptionist. Tell me exactly what you said. Just don't tell me, just do it." First thing he did is he reached into his pocket, and he pulled out a resume, and he handed me a resume. Now, as soon as he handed a resume, was he an expert in cheese, or was he a job seeker? Next thing he said, "I understand that you have a job opening for a quality assurance manager. I would like to talk to your manager, your general manager, about the position." And I immediately said, "Let me send you to human resource." Why? Because what are receptionists paid to do? They're paid to protect the employers. They're paid to direct people to the right place. Do general managers talk to job seekers? No. Who talks to job seekers? Human resource. So between the resume and talking about a position, he had automatically told her, I am a job seeker, and she knew where to refer him. And so what he was saying was actually creating the very barrier he was running up against. We worked with him. It took 8 minutes to work with him on a new approach. This was his new approach. Instead of no resume, he kept it in his pocket. And he walked in, he said, I understand that your plant manager is wanting to improve the quality of food produced here at Nestle's or Meadow Gold. He said, I have been an expert in food quality on 5 continents. For example, at one company, we identified 26 impurities in our cheese. It took us 3 months to get all the impurities out. But when we were done, the quality of our cheese improved so much that sales increased by 20% in the next 12 months. Now, are those the results your general manager is looking for? Now, in this case, is she going to refer him to human resource? No. Human resource cannot talk about the quality of the food. Probably going to get into the general manager, or at least to the quality manager. Had another one. This guy, he was so frustrated. He'd been doing everything we said he thought, and he couldn't even get into an interview. And I sat down and I said, what's your ideal job? If you could do anything, what would it be? He said, my ideal job would be to be in the men's clothing section of Macy's department stores. I said, okay, I am the manager of the men's clothing section. Call me. Ring, ring, Larry Stevenson, men's clothing, Macy's, how may I help you? And this is what he said. First stupid thing out of his mouth. He said, hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm looking for a job, and I filled out your online application, and I'd like to come in for an interview. I said to him, let me refer you to human resource. He said, that's what everyone does. Why does everyone do that? Why won't they let me talk to the sales manager? I said, because you're not coming across as a salesman. You're coming across as a job seeker, and human resource deals with it. Well, no, they should have to tell me exactly. They should see me because I filled out their online application. I said, look, tell you what. Have you learned to say something else? And he said, well, yeah, I took this course and they taught me how to say this. I said, give me your 30-second elevator pitch. He said, okay, this is it. I said, Larry Stevenson, men's clothing, Macy's. He said, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I am a results-oriented men's clothier. For example, at my last store, I increased sales in my area by 20% month over month for 9 months in a row. I also increased the turns on our racks from 6 turns to 8 turns a year. I said, why aren't you saying that? That's exactly what a sales manager wants to hear. He said, well, I was saving it for when I got into his office because that was all he had to say. I said, use it, you'll get into the office. Now, I need to tell you, this was on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. He's going into what field? Retail. I want you to think, what's happening that weekend in the retail industry? It is the worst weekend of the year for a sales manager. I mean, it's great. They're doing all kinds of sales, but it is chaos. Monday, as I was coming into work, he was there and he said, I start at Macy's in the men's clothing department today. Now, why, on the toughest weekend of the year, did he get a job And the manager not only gave him a job, took the time to interview him during the most hectic day of his year. It's simple. What did the sales manager need right then? He needed someone who could push clothes. What did this gentleman tell him he could do? Increase sales by 20% month over month. He came in and didn't make it about him, but about what he could do for that sales manager. The how can I help attitude. One last story to emphasize this. I had most people come to me. I had one lady, she said, looking for a job is the most demeaning thing I have ever done. She says, I used to think it was like standing in front of Walmart and holding a sign, will work for food. But then I realized it was worse. I had to chase the cars down the street shouting, pick me, pick me. Now compare that with Vic. Vic came into one of our workshops. He had just been laid off as an aviation flight test engineer in a state that does not have a lot of aviation. And the day he had been laid off, the same company had laid off 1,300 people. Vic was discouraged. He came to our workshop, and the first day he really wrestled with this, how can I help attitude. Setting aside and coming up with how can I help as his reaction. And he wrestled with it that first day. The second day, you could tell he got it. 2.5 weeks later, he came in and he said something that no one ever says. He said, Larry, I'm having so much fun on this job search. I said, really? Tell me about it. He said, it's all about how can I help and treating people like human beings. He said, for example, the Friday after the workshop, I got an email, and before the workshop, I had sent my resume to this Air Force base, and the HR person had sent back and said, we'll circulate your resume. And I thought, yeah, right, like they're going to do that on government work. But that Friday, she sent back to me an email and said, I really think you could improve your resume if you will make the following changes. And he said, all I could think was, I wanted to thank her. She made my day. No one had ever done that to me. So I picked up the phone and I called her. I said, look, I got your email. I just want to call and say thank you. You made my week, and I'm going to make the changes, and is it okay if I send you the updated one? But what I'm really calling is just to say thank you. Said another story. I had to apply because the unemployment insurance required that I apply for anything that was close. And I saw this job for a radar intern, an intern at a radar company, and I had to apply for it. And they called me 2 days ago, and they said, hey, we saw you and we'd like to talk to you. And he said, the first thing out of my mouth, Larry, was, I really don't want to be an intern. He said, I can't believe I did that. I got sucked into that. It's about me. But I recovered quickly, and I said, but maybe I can help. Tell me what radar you're working on. And they told him, and he said, oh, I used to work on that radar. Does it still have these problems? And they said, yeah, that's what we're trying to fix. He said, oh, let me send you an email and see if that'll help. Said I took about 2 hours and sent an email, and they called me and they said, I showed the email to our engineers. I'd really like to have you come in. He said, Larry, I didn't say it this time, but I really don't want to be an intern. I said, Vic, they're not viewing you as an intern now. They're viewing you as a solution. He said, oh, I should call him back, shouldn't I? I said, yeah. Final story, he said, I was on the phone to a lady in Texas, and he's up north, and he said, so how's the weather down there? And she said, oh, it's 46 degrees. And he said, you must be freezing to death because none of your buildings have heaters in them, do they? She said, you're right. How did you know that? And he said, I used to fly jets at the Air Force Base just down the street from you. I know none of the buildings down there have heaters. She said, really, what jet do you fly? And he told her. She said, we just got the 15-year service contract to totally revamp that jet, and we can't find anyone with experience. And he came back with, well, how can I help? Those were the end of his 3 stories. But 2 weeks later, he came back in. He was carrying a box of donuts, because that's how they told us when they get jobs. People would bring in a box of donuts. It caused some real problem because they were getting 7 and 8 dozen a week, and they were all gaining weight. And so they tried carrots and cauliflower, but that didn't go over, so they went back to donuts. So he walks in with his donuts, and he says, you will never believe. You remember that lady I called just to say thank you? In 2 weeks, I start at the Air Force Base making 15% more money than I was making on my last job. And it's all because of my how can I help attitude and calling her and saying thank you. Said, but I've got a problem. And I ask all of you who are listening to this if this is the kind of problem you'd like to have. He said, my problem is this. You remember the lady in Texas? Well, she and another person in Florida have already bought tickets to fly me out for an interview. And I'm trying to figure out, should I tell them I took a job or go ahead with the trip? Now, wouldn't you love to have that kind of an experience? And that comes from adopting the how can I help attitude. You see, the problem is when people think like job seekers, or they have this how can I help thinking, it changes significantly. For example, and I'm not saying a job seeker is a bad person. I'm saying that when we lose our job, we have a tendency to lose our professional identity. And we're at a party, and someone comes up and says, so, what do you do for a living? And you can tell if you've lost your identity if rather than saying, well, I have 20 years in marketing or I have 7 years in mechanical engineering, you say, well, I'm in between jobs, or I'm looking for something better, or you're scared to death to answer. That's indicating you've lost your professional identity, and in the void, in that vacuum, we have a tendency to adopt the job seeker mentality, the job seeker identity. And the problem is the thinking of a job seeker is just all wrong. Let me give some examples. Job seekers think great jobs are advertised. Job seekers doubt anything good is out there because they don't see great jobs being advertised. They see a lot of call centers and they see a lot of low-level jobs. Third, they focus on themselves. They walk into a meeting. First, they call the meeting an interview. They walk into it, and their whole focus is on them and what they're going to say and how they're going to come across. Next, they walk into the meetings totally unprepared. They pull out their resume or they send their resume as a first contact. They walk into the people. They chase people, not information. They call it networking, but it's just more people, but they're not getting any good information because they're saying stupid stuff like, do you have an opening? When the person says no, then you got to go find the other person. Once again, they use an advertised job description to prepare for a $500,000 meeting, and that's based on $100,000 a year over 5 years on the job. And they irritate decision makers after the meeting by asking, have you made a decision yet? These are things job seekers do, and then they wonder why they're failing. With the how can I help thinking, you begin to change that approach. First, you recognize that decision makers hire people they know first. If they don't know the person, they ask the people they know, who do you know who could do this? And the last place they want to go is advertising. And even if the company has a policy they have to advertise, they're still wanting to hire the people who already have impressed them as the solution they need. Second, with how I can help, they realize that many organizations need help. They look at what they can do and how they could help, and they find people who are having the challenges or want to achieve the goals, and they recognize there are lots of organizations that need that kind of help. Third, they focus on how can I help you achieve your goals. Their purpose in that meeting, their purpose is gathering the right information to identify the problems that need solved, and then approaching the decision maker not on themselves, but on how can I help you achieve your goals. They recognize that networking is about gathering information about organizational goals and challenges in preparation for meetings. They do their due diligence and they gather information so that when they walk into the meeting, they are prepared. And in that meeting, they share good, solid information to help the decision maker make good decisions. It's not about them. It's about helping the decision maker make good decisions. And finally, they reconnect to give more information to make the decision. We're going to talk about this one in our third webinar on how to adapt the How I Can Help attitude. The third step is to ask questions to discover wants and needs. Now that you recognize that your approach is how can I help, you have to find those people who have needs of your skills to help them achieve their goals. And that's the key, is you're now approaching people not to ask for a job, not about you, but to ask them about what they're doing and to ask them what's working well and to ask them what they could use some help on achieving and seeing if that matches what you can do. You're going to talk to two different kinds of people. You're going to gather information from people who are not doing the job you want, but working in organizations that have people like that. And you're going to gather information from people doing the job, and you ask different questions of each group. And in our fourth seminar, we're going to go into detail on the questions to ask to discover wants and needs. Now, once you've discovered their needs and wants, you can now begin to prove you are the solution they need. And to do that, we prepare home run statements. A home run statement is just like a baseball field. First base is where, second base is what, third base are the results, and home plate applies what you have done to them specifically. Let me show a quick example. First base, as supervisor at Acme Supply, I streamlined production lanes and put the right people in the right seats. As a result, we increased productivity by 87% in 3 months and 230% in 2 years. Are those the kinds of results you want in your organization? Excuse me. We prepare these statements to use to prove we are the person that they want. We are the solution they're looking for. For example, with phone calls to decision makers, you can now say, my name is Larry Stevenson. John and Mary on your team recommended I talk to you. Is now a good time for a 2-minute conversation? John and Mary said you want to increase productivity. Excuse me, I'm sorry for this cough. They recommended I call you because I increased productivity at one place by 87% in 4 months, 230% in 2 years. I also was part of a team that achieved 12-month goals 3 months early. Now, are those the results you want? Then when can we meet to discuss how I can help you achieve your goals? See how the focus of the entire conversation is on the decision maker, what the decision maker wants and needs, and how you may be the solution. And if you'll notice, in that conversation, we became part of their team by introducing that we had talked to John and Mary first. We refer back to John and Mary and we confirm that what they told us is what the decision maker wants. We then give the third base portion of our home run statements, 2 of them, and then we confirm, are those the results you want? Now, what you've had happen in this phone call is 6 times the decision maker has nodded their head up and down yes. So when they say, we understand this is what you want, this is what I've done, are those the results you want? Then saying, when can we meet to discuss how I can help you achieve your goals? See how it's all about how I can help, not about me. In the meeting, you share solid information. You describe your skills and abilities that relate to their wants and needs. If you find companies saying you're overqualified, it's because you shared the wrong information to help them make a good decision. You know this as professionals. You don't share extraneous information, no matter how good it is, if it doesn't relate to the decision being considered. Next, you have to turn negatives into positives. Every professional knows that in a presentation, in a meeting, problems are going to occur. Negatives happen. They want to see how you can do at turning negatives into positives to create the solutions you need. Many times you have to ask questions to gather more information about what they're looking for, about what they want, or sometimes they'll ask you a bizarre question like, if you were going to be a tree, what kind of tree would you be? Just to see how you're going to think. Whether you're going to be someone who runs off with not enough information and wastes money, rather than taking the time to gather the correct information to answer appropriately. The last thing is I talk about sharing your dessert tray to the question, tell me about yourself, where you describe very quickly in less than 30 seconds hobbies, service, civic service, education, past work, and third base portion of maybe 2 or 3 home runs. This becomes a dessert tray that you can present to them when they say, tell me about yourself. Once again, we will go over this in detail in our 5th section on proving you are the solutions they need. Now that you have prepared to find out what they need, you've got the right attitude, and you are prepared to say the right thing to prove you are the solution, we then move to connecting after the meeting, because you will be getting meetings. And the first thing you do is after the meeting, you analyze, who did I meet with? Make sure you get the correct spelling. What went well in the meeting? What did I wish I said what did I say that I wish I had not said? What didn't I say I wish that I had? And what weakness did they possibly see in me? Then you're going to reconnect. You're going to leave a handwritten card emphasizing what went well with the receptionist for each person you met with. Don't see the person, just leave the handwritten card, which means you brought handwritten cards. You did the analysis out of sight, you wrote the cards, and you brought them back. Then 3 to 4 days later, you're going to call fixing what you wish you had not said. You're going to call and say, is now a good time for a 2-minute conversation? I was thinking about the answer I gave to this question, and I just wanted to give you this information. Is that what you're looking for? 3 to 4 days later, you call them back and you give that great answer that came to you after the meeting. This is Larry Stevenson. We talked. I wanted to let you know that question you asked is stuck with me, and I wanted to give you this information, and you give that great answer. Then 3 to 4 working days later, you call showing what you have done to compensate for a weakness. You wanted someone who had this software background. I had this software background. I spent 8 hours meeting with people using that software. They taught me how to do this, 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 and this. I've also signed up for a course, and those 4 people I talked to have agreed to help me if I run into any problems with you. Is that the kind of problem solver you want on your team? You're going to end each of those phone calls with, I really want to work with you to achieve your goals. Is now a good time to set a second meeting? And that's about as heavy as you'll say it. And while everyone else is at home waiting for a phone call, or is calling and saying the stupid thing of, have you made a decision yet, which just irritates them. You're giving them further information to make a good decision and asking, is now a good time to set a second meeting? So now we know how to gather information. We know how to prove you are the solution in phone calls, in the meetings, and reconnecting after the meetings. Now we come to the final step, which is to make your tens. And when we say make your tens, we're talking about contacting 10 people a day and setting 10 face-to-face meetings a week. Now the contacts are going to be a 5-minute contacts. The meetings are 20 minutes. Now you're all in shock, but let me remind you, we're thinking, how can I help? And so when you contact the 10 people a day, 4 to 6 of those are to gather information on wants and needs. They're to use the scripts and the questions you've prepared. So you're not trying to find a lead, you're gathering information. You're using 2 to 3 a day to set appointments for meetings, and then you're using 2 to 3 to reconnect on the previous meetings. And that's how you're getting 10 people a day. The majority of them are not about job openings. That's job seeker thinking. They're about finding out who has the needs, who has the goals that you can solve. The 10 meetings per week, 6 to 7 of them, once again, are to gather information on wants and needs. And 3 to 4 of them are to prove to decision makers how you can help them achieve their goals and resolve their problems. We're going to talk about this in our 6th session. Now, to find these people, you can find 50 people to contact in 2 hours each Monday. And Monday morning is a lousy time to look for jobs because everyone's catching up. So every Monday, you're going to find and identify 50 people to contact. Takes 2 hours. You're going to look for 10 of them on your phone and your email contacts. You're going to find 20 of them from LinkedIn, Facebook, associations, or directories. 10 of them are going to be following up on previous contacts or meetings because you're doing 10 meetings a week. So you've got 10 that you're following up with. And then you have 7 want ads and 3 other sources. And if you use that, that's a total of 50 contacts. That's 10 a day. Now that's the overview to the 5 keys to getting a great job quickly. This works. I've shared some stories. I could share hundreds of other stories about people who adopted this approach and turned what was the most demeaning experience into their lives into one of the greatest and most fun that they've ever had, because it feels great to help someone else achieve their goals. This really works. I hope you will join us next month, Friday, at 1 p.m. Mountain Standard on our freeconferencecall.com with the meeting ID Larry732. You can email me or look at our website, or I hope to see you on Facebook. Once again, great jobs in 2 months. It works. Thank you.